I talk a lot about bluegrass music and the relative nature of what it was. Anybody out there think Flatt and Scruggs is a bluegrass band?
Yeah.
How about Reno and Smiley, or the Stanley Brothers?
Yeah.
Well, how come they never billed themselves as such? They always called themselves country music. That was because there was this domain back in those days called bluegrass. Back in those days, a music form or rhythm defined it. It didn't matter whether it was Bob Marley's music and you or what it was, or whether it was the bossa nova that plays under the Girl from Ipanema, or whatever it was. A rhythm form would define the musical form itself. And Monroe was about the rhythm playingest character I ever played with in my life, and his rhythm played at a pace that none of the other acoustic string band music, especially the 40s and 50s and 60s, had. It was more like the choppy tempos and arrangements of the Chicago jazz bands during the late 20s and early 30s when he was in that part of the country. But I started talking about some of this stuff around. Actually, I did about a 5 or 6 hour video for Radford University last year of talking the origin and development of bluegrass music as a pure creative art form. And I differentiated from what we're hearing out here in this day and time, because in this day and time it tends to be more of a communication skill. It's the way guys in Bean Blossom, Indiana get together out from under a tree, and you got one from California and one from Michigan and one from Florida and one from New York and everything. And it's the way they have fellowship. And it's mostly a communication and a social medium like that at this point. You know, you don't hear the Blue Moons of Kentucky being written anymore, or the instrumentals. Those 50s instrumentals was what I zeroed in on that Joanne picked up on. And I just asked people, have you ever played the third part, the Wheelhouse? Because there's a third part on the record that Hubert Davis plays. It goes like and you got a big G run there. But back in those days, the individual instrumentalists would come up with their own breaks on the tunes. When it developed itself from being the primal form it was in the 40s and 50s, as it gravitated into being a more elevated art form, when melodic banjo came along, when Bill Keith was introduced into the band, all of a sudden the scope of the music just sort of went like this. Because where did you hear that Rudy Lyle break on Rawhide? Where did you hear that Hubert Davis break on Wheelhouse? Where it was, the break itself was unique to the instrument that it was being played on. And I say the scope of the music went like this because all of a sudden the banjo's playing what the fiddle's playing, what the mandolin taught him, and then it allows the mandolin to improvise on the thing beyond that. But most of the banjo players from '63 this way were struggling to play exactly the same thing that the fiddle was on that stuff. So in essence, the music changed a lot back there. But anyhow, on this video, it lasted, I came up to the house about 5 or 6 days running, I think, and videoed it. And right now it's waiting for the State Attorney General to sign off on, I used 60-some pieces of music describing this evolution. I started out with J.E. and Wade Maynard and Jimmy Rogers, and played sound clips of all these songs and showing the way the music developed. When I got Monroe playing Mule Skinner, I replayed Jimmy Rogers' kickoff to Mule Skinner so you could hear the difference in that country blues rhythm and the choppier rhythms that Monroe brought to the table at that point. So anyhow, as I said, this whole thing is waiting right now. It's already been edited down and everything. There's 5 DVDs of it that go anywhere from an hour to an hour and 20 minutes each. They've talked about making it into a PBS special. But it just talks about this music and how it develops. And as I said, I put in sound clips all the way to show the differences in these instrumentals, to show what it was like, the difference of the pre-Flatt and Scruggs Bluegrass Boys when that transition was made in 45 and 46. They're bringing that sound together because it's really an interesting thing. Buckminster Fuller years ago coined this term called synergetics, or synergy. And basically what it said was the end result is greater than the sum of the parts. In 1944, if you'd have walked around and had up here and had Earl Scruggs playing over in this corner and Bill Monroe back in that next room and Lester Flatt playing out here in Bobby Patterson's place. You listen to them individually, there would have been no way you could have predicted the sound that they made as a unit. It was almost like 2 and 2 equals 5 right there. The sound was greater than the sum of the parts. It was interesting stuff. Anyhow, if they don't get that thing at Radford University, anyhow, you'll be able to lock into it on their website. It's contained somewhere in the library or the Appalachian Studies. There's this guy named Bud Bennett who's done it. And like I said, as soon as I get that sign off from the State Attorney General on using these sound clips I put in there, it's already been okayed and everything. They just ain't got a piece of paper with a signature on it. That'll all get released. But it gives you my look, and my look is a bluegrass boy's look, because while I was in Monroe's band especially, I made an effort to meet every bluegrass boy that I possibly could and try to get them to tell me what it was like. You know, Bobby Hicks told me down here at the Wayne Henderson thing that we worked this year for Kaz, that the Monroe job was one of the best, most agreeable jobs he ever had in his career. And I said, boy, I would sure like to work for the old man while he was still part of the band, because it was one of the hardest jobs that I ever did, just from the demands that he would put on me. And I don't know whether it was as a banjo player, just because he didn't like the way I lived my life. Whatever the problem was, it certainly wasn't a bed of roses that Bobby Hicks described to me. But I've never worked for in any kind of environment that was like, you were like in hyperspeed as far as learning. That old man, every day there was something new come out of his hat that sent us all scurrying for a